For generations, the Age of Fire survived through sacrifice. When the first flame began to fade, a chosen champion would rise, or as some would say, an Ashen One, and give everything to keep the world alive. It was a cycle repeated countless times, each linking, delaying the inevitable end. But in Dark Souls 3, that cycle was finally challenged. Prince Lothric was born to become the next Lord of Cinder, the one destined to link the fire and preserve the Age of Fire. Yet, when his moment came, he refused, setting in motion the events that would shape the entire story of Dark Souls 3. But what if he made a different choice? What if Prince Lothric accepted his fate and linked the fire? This is the alternative history of the prince who chose sacrifice and the world that followed. At the end of the Age of Fire, the world of Dark Souls 3 was already nearing collapse. The first flame, once the source of all life and other, was fading once again. And as it had many times before, the world prepared for sacrifice to delay the inevitable end. In the kingdom of Lothric, a prince was born into this failing cycle. Prince Lothric was not raised as a ruler in the traditional sense, but as a vessel. Someone destined to become a Lord of Cinder. His entire existence was shaped around a single purpose: to link the first flame and preserve the Age of Fire for a little longer. But as Lothric grew, so did his doubt. Guided by the teachings surrounding him and shaped by his bond by his older brother, he began to understand what this destiny truly meant. Linking the fire was not a triumphant, it wasn't a win, but a reputation of suffering. A cycle where kingdoms rose only to be burned away again. Endless delaying a truth no one wanted to face. And when the moment finally came for him to fulfill his role, Lothric refused. Not out of weakness, but understanding. If Prince Lothric had accepted his fate, the story of Dark Souls 3 would change before it even begins. Because the entire game exists for one reason: Lothric refused. If the prince chose to link the first flame, there would be no need to awaken the previous Lords of Cinder. The bells would never toll, and the ancient champions would remain where they had fallen. Aldrid's devourer of gods would have remained deep within Irithyll, the Boreal Valley, continuing his slow descent into darkness. Yorm the Giant would remain seated upon his throne in the profane capital, never called upon to sacrifice himself again. And the Abyss Watchers would continue their endless battle against the Abyss, locked in a conflict that never reaches its conclusion. Even Lulith of Corlin, the one lord who willingly remained, would never need to hold his lonely vigil at the Firelink Shrine, because there would be no shrine waiting for champions, and no journey waiting to begin. More importantly, the Unkindled would never rise. Without the lords abandoning their thrones, there would be no reason to awaken the failed ashes of past champions. The Ashen One would never be called into existence. The journey across collapsing kingdoms, the battle against fallen lords, and the final march towards the kiln of the first flame would never happen. The world would continue, quietly. Lothric would link the flame, sacrifice himself to prolong the Age of Fire once again. The flame would grow stronger, and for a time, the signs of decay would retreat. The kingdom would stabilize, and the lands would stop converging into one another. The slow collapse seen throughout Dark Souls 3 would be delayed. But that's it. Just delayed. But this would not be a permanent solution, because every linking of the fire grows weaker than the last. And even if Lothric succeeded, the flame would still fade again someday. The difference is this time, Dark Souls 3 would never unfold the way that we know it today. No Ashen One would rise, no lords would be hunted, and the Twin Princes would never stand as the final barrier to the Age of Fire. Instead, Lothric himself would become the Lord of Cinder, and the world would continue its slow, inevitable march towards another fading flame, and everything would just be delayed. When the first flame begins to fade again, the rise of the Ashen One will still happen, but the journey will look very different from the one that we know. In the original timeline, the Ashen One's purpose is clear from the start: hunt down the Lords of Cinders who have abandoned their thrones, and force them back into the cycle. But in this timeline, the world will not be in the same state of collapse. The lands may still be connected, but not in the desperate convergence seen in the original game. Instead of a world already on the brink, the Ashen One will be entering a slower, more uncertain decline. More importantly, Prince Lothric would now exist as a former Lord of Cinder, someone who has already linked the fire and witnessed the consequences firsthand. This changes his role entirely. Rather than being the final obstacle preventing the linking of the fire, Lothric becomes a figure shaped by experience, someone who understands the cost better than most. This would also change the tone of the Ashen One's journey. Instead of simply reclaiming reluctant lords, the Ashen One may encounter figures who are even more divided about what should happen next. Some may support the continuing cycle, while others, like Lothric, may question whether linking the fire again is worth the sacrifice. The confrontation with Lothric would no longer be about forcing a prince to accept his destiny. Instead, it would become a clash of perspectives between someone tasked with preserving the Age of Fire and someone who has already tried. And in that moment, the Ashen One's journey becomes less about restoring the past and more about deciding that the cycle should continue at all. From birth, Prince Lothric was never meant to live a normal life. He was frail, sickly, and weak, and yet despite this, he was viewed as the last hope of his royal bloodline. The kingdom of Lothric placed everything on him, not because he was strong, but because he was necessary. In the original timeline, Lothric ultimately rejected this destiny, and that refusal may not have come from him alone. There are hints that someone influenced the prince's thinking, someone who questioned the linking of the fire and may have guided Lothric towards doubting the very role that he was born to fulfill. Some theories suggest even that this mysterious scholar could have been connected to Aldea, scholar of the first sin from Dark Souls 2. Aldea spent his life searching for ways to escape the cycle entirely, questioning both light and dark, and reject the idea that linking the fire was a true solution. If someone like Aldea, or someone inspired by his ideas, influenced Lothric, then the prince's refusal becomes much easier to understand. But in this alternative timeline, that influence never happens. Without someone planting doubt, Lothric grew up accepting what he was told. He is still frail, still physically weak, but mentally, he's committed to the role he was born into. Instead of questioning the cycle, he seems linking the fire as his only purpose, and possibly his only way to save his kingdom. This also changes the dynamic with his older brother. Rather than standing beside his older brother in refusal, his older brother may have likely supported Lothric's decision to fulfill his duty. His role becomes less about protecting a brother who rejected fate and more about helping him reach it. Instead of two brothers resisting the cycle together, they become two brothers preparing for sacrifice. And in this version of events, Lothric doesn't refuse the flame because he was never given reason to doubt it. If Prince Lothric linked the first flame, the immediate crisis would be avoided, but the long-term consequences would still reshape the future of the world. Unlike the original timeline where everything begins collapsing at once, this version of events would create a temporary period of stability. Lands would stop converging, kingdoms would continue on, and the sense of urgency that defines Dark Souls 3 would be delayed. This would also change how future generations view the Age of Fire. Instead of seeing a prince who refused his duty, they will remember someone who fulfilled it, reinforcing the belief that linking the fire is still the path forward. The idea of sacrifice would remain strong, and the cycle would continue with fewer doubts, at least for a time. But eventually, the same scenario as with all the other scenarios we have discussed would return. When the first flame begins to fade yet again, another heir, another champion, or another unkindled would be needed, and by then, Lothric's sacrifice would become just another part of history, another example of a world trying to hold on to something that continues to slip away. In this way, Lothric's linking the flame wouldn't end the cycle or change its direction. It would simply, as always, postpone the inevitable. And like every extension before it,
the world would move forward until the flame begins to fade once again.